Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much to everyone who's joining us today. My name is Bethany Miller, and I'm coming to you with CE National as part of our series of digital labs specifically directed towards ministry wives and really all women who are serving in ministry, whatever that role may be for you. We're excited to be offering you a series of labs that hopefully will help you and encourage you in that role, whatever you take on, in advancing the kingdom of God. We appreciate you and the work that you're doing, and whatever we can do to support you is an awesome thing. So hopefully these labs are of great support to you. Today, I want to give a very warm welcome to my guests. We have Vicki and Nicole here. They are both part of Women of Grace, which is a ministry of Charis Fellowship that is doing on a much bigger scale than what we're doing. Again, that idea of supporting women who are in ministry. That is their work. And so it makes all the sense in the world to have them as part of this series so that we can introduce to any of you who are unaware their organization and the ministries and the resources that they have to offer, because there is a lot. I've been exploring them myself, and I'm excited to hear more today. And I hope that for those of you who are listening, that this will be really helpful to you and you might learn something new about the resources that are out there and available to you. So Vicki and Nicole, I'm going to just start by asking that the two of you introduce yourselves to our listeners. If you'll give us just a brief background of your own journey in ministry, how you came to be involved with Women of Grace, and then what your role is currently with that organization. And Vicki, I'll start with you. If you'll just give us that's a lot of questions to ask you to do briefly. Whatever.
Okay, I'll try to be brief.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Ever since I was a little girl, I always felt like I wanted to serve God in some way. But it seemed like I kind of took a rabbit trail. God took me more into writing and editing. So I studied English and journalism. But my biggest demand as far as jobs was because of my Spanish. I grew up on the mission field in Argentina, where my parents were missionaries until I was 15. So I attended the public schools there. So I taught Spanish and English and journalism at middle school and high school levels, and then at Grace College for about 6 years, I taught Spanish. So then in the meantime, I had this real passion for ministering to girls and getting them a good foundation. And so I got involved with SMM, which was called Serving My Master at that time, and ended up being on the cabinet. I was like the district coordinator we did all kinds of gatherings and things. And then I ended up being hired by CE National, actually, to do their communications for about 10 years. And then Women of Grace asked me to come on as their communications person. I did that for about 10 years. And then the last 6 years, I've been the executive director. So, yeah.
That's great. We'll see. It makes all the sense in the world, even more so that you would be joining us, since you've got a background with both CE and Women of Grace. So that's wonderful. Mm-hmm. And Nicole, how about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Yeah, I kind of lucked out in that I ran into Women of Grace my freshman year of college. So I have been in ministry and involved with Women of Grace since the very beginning of my adulthood. So that's been just really a blessing to me, because I haven't had to, kind of search and find women who are like-minded and have a passion for Jesus and connecting with each other. I just have kind of always had that in my background. So that's been just really cool for me. At Grace, I was actually studying youth ministry. Thought I was going to go into working with teens and go that route. Didn't really like children at that point, which is just interesting. We'll get there. But so I was studying youth ministry, and then felt that God laid on my heart to develop something specifically for girls. And so as a little freshman, I just wrote this plan for girls and what we could do for them. And I went, okay, Lord, like, this is great, but what do I do with it? And so at that time, I was connected with Vicki Rice and then Janet Minnick, who was the president of Women of Grace at that time. And through that, they just kind of bolstered me in ministry and encouraged me to develop my gifts and to continue to look towards developing something for girls, even though we already had it. So I just kind of worked on that through the next half a decade, I don't know. And then in 2009, I was actually at seminary. Well, I was going back to seminary at that point. I was working on my master's at Grace, and I was going to raise support to work with Youth for Christ. And I said, man, if I'm going to raise support for an organization, why not do it for an organization that I love and that I'm passionate about and that, you know, understands me and is rooting for me? And so at that time, I started raising support to be the girls ministry coordinator, which isn't really a thing. I just kind of said, hey, I want to work with you. Can I raise money to work with you? And Vicki was the director of girls ministries at that time. So I kind of worked myself into this little position and did that for several years. And then when Vicki became the executive director, then I became director of girls ministries. And so, yeah, it's just been kind of a journey for me, but I've had just this group of women who have been my cheerleaders. I just graduated with my doctorate in May. And so for me, Women of Grace, yes, it's the ministry that I work with, but it's also the ministry that has, you know, cheerleaded me up to this point. So it's, you know, they're near and dear to my heart, all the women and all the leadership. So that's kind of a little bit of my background. So I oversee, as the director of girls ministries, I oversee Sisters Mentoring with a Mission, which is over 100-year-old discipleship ministry specifically for young girls and teen girls.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, it's fantastic to see that you've grown with the organization. What a cool experience.
Yeah.
And also congratulations on your doctorate, because that's a huge.
Oh, thank you.
So, and I am certain that the organization is benefiting greatly from the education you've received and learned. And so just congratulations to that, and love seeing someone put that to work in an organization. So, and with that, now that we kind of have the history of both of you, maybe one of you could give us a little bit of history of the organization of Women of Grace, and, you know, however that, whatever form that takes, how it was founded and how it's grown and where it is today.
Good. Yeah, Women of Grace started in 1939 as mostly focused on how can we help missionaries. At that time, our missions organization was new. They weren't organized to do a lot of the details of what missionaries needed. So, for example, this mission, it was called Women's Missionary Council, and they did things like, I remember when we went to the mission field, they had experts who knew how to pack your barrels to get the best way to get through customs. It was amazing. And they rolled bandages. They would take sheets and tear them up and roll them into bandages for the medical mission in Africa. And just, they did all kinds of support for missions. I remember, sticks out for me as a child. They would send us birthday cards on it, which was wonderful because we didn't get mail very often. And a lot of them would include either a stick of gum, one stick of gum, because they couldn't fit a whole pack, or a little packet of Kool-Aid. And I remember for my 8th birthday, I wanted Kool-Aid for my birthday dinner so badly. And I just prayed that somebody would think to put Kool-Aid in a packet. And somebody did. So on the day of my birthday, I got a card that actually had a packet. You know, little things like that meant a lot when we were in a society that couldn't, you know, for example, for us, we didn't have access to some of those simple things that were special pleasures. So they did a lot of encouraging the missionaries. And I think the biggest thing was it was a prayer organization. And so they spent a lot of time getting together and praying for the missionaries, usually met once a month. But back then there was kind of this club mentality. So you belonged to WMC as a club, and it was kind of a group like that. So then in about 2000, I think it had started before, but in 2000 they really decided that they needed to look at the whole fellowship and all the women, not just the ones that were focused on missions. Part of that was because of some changes in society. And so as we looked for direction, by then I was just coming on, and we found out that one of the most important things was that women needed to really figure out how they fit into the church and how they could use their gifts. And so we started really focusing on, if we can train women in the local church who are the leaders, then they can go back to their local church and help the women in their churches. So we started focusing on leadership development and also really the value of community. It seemed like that was a huge need among the women at that time. And so God just showed us basically what we needed to do. He's led us each step of the way. It's been fun, exciting. Nicole's been along with us to pray about things. We've seen God do amazing things. But basically, we exist to equip the women of the Charis Fellowship for local ministry with global impact. So we say local ministry, global impact. What we are doing today in ministry is going to somehow affect our whole globe, whether it's kids that we're investing in who someday are going to go to the far reaches, whether it's just the ways that we help and encourage each other and try to make sure that we have good, strong biblical foundation so that each of us is a solid influence in whatever sphere God places us. So local ministry, global impact is kind of our mantra.
Yeah. It makes me think of the image of, and I'm sure this is not new to anybody, but the image of like, if you throw a stone in the water, the ripples. So yeah, you might be aware of the first ripple, but then as people move out and conduct their ministries, how far God takes that and reaches with it is up to him. So probably farther than any of us ever know. And Vicki, I just love that story of the fact that this organization blessed you as a child, even through something as simple as a Kool-Aid packet. I think that's incredible.
Yes.
And it speaks to my heart of just how much further encouragement can go. Sometimes what we think is a small matter can really have a deep impact on somebody's life. And so I think it's an incredible foundation for what you're doing today. It's just so fun. So thank you for sharing that. And with that, then that kind of brings us to today. Like you said, that local, forgive me, I'm going to mess it up, but the local impact with the global reach.
Local ministry, global impact.
Local ministry, global impact. So what are the local ministry opportunities? And by that, I'm getting at, what are the various programs that Women of Grace has to offer right now? And if both of you can just give us an overview of, and however many opportunities there are, both events, programs, resources, what are things that women can take advantage of?
Nicole, why don't you go ahead and share some?
Okay, I'll go ahead and talk about our Ignite 3126 classes. Gosh, they are just so much fun. Sometimes when I talk about the ministry, I'm like, oh man, they're so exciting for me, but they're so exciting, for everybody. But they are classes that just kind of started with a desire to equip women to lead in their local ministry. So how can we get some resources in the hands of women right where they're at to do the ministry that God's called them to do and do it well? So it's a partnership between Women of Grace and Grace Seminary. So what's really cool about that is that all of the classes are theologically sound because they have that backing from Grace Seminary. And then Vicki and Dr. Christy Hill with Grace Seminary worked on developing those. And at first there was just a leadership track. And what's really cool is over the last year and a half, we've begun to develop also a foundations track. So there's two separate tracks in the classes that women can kind of dip their toes in the foundation and kind of just, ramp up and then get to the leadership part and study really how do we lead well as women? What does that look like? What does God call us to? And they're weekend interactive. So they're Friday and Saturday, and you can get CEUs through them. So there's a certain amount of seat time that you have to sit for getting the CEUs. But CEUs are an awesome, cool benefit of it. But the great part of it is the personal networking and the interaction with other women. I'm one of the trained facilitators, so it's really neat to just kind of sit back. There's material presented, but then after the materials presented, there's all sorts of activities and interactive parts of it that you just get to sit back and see women's stories unfold and link together and connect, and you just really get to see how God has woven our stories together and our journeys impact each other, and you just really walk away with some new knowledge, but also with just dear friends that are equipped the same way you are, but also, you know, sisters in arms, doing the things that you're doing maybe a little bit differently, but ready to, step into leadership and hold you accountable and encourage you through the hard times and those types of things. We also have a facilitators training course. So every facilitator that does a class goes through a week-long course with Dr. Christy Hill and is trained to teach those classes. And 1/4 of them are bilingual. So our classes are not only offered in English, but they're offered in Spanish. So that's just really exciting that they're not, they're not just a little segregated thing, but it, you know, they can be offered in both languages, and it's just great. And then we also bring the classes to the churches. So it's not like we kind of hoard it in Winona Lake or wherever, but we kind of say, hey, if you need this kind of class, if you want to work on soul care and leadership, or if you want to learn about worldview and how that impacts you, then you contact us and we say, okay, we're going to bring the class to you. These are the ways that you can help us do that. And then we bring the class to the church, and there's no need to do that extra travel because we're coming to the women where they're at. So just, if you can't tell, I'm really excited about the Ignite 3126 classes. They're just great.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I will say, and I'm not sure if it was exactly through that program, but I had the chance to be part of a Woman of Grace weekend experience many years ago. But I was actually engaged at the time and planning my wedding. But the women that I sat with at my table, we had the best time. And so I love that you said that it really is, yes, the content so important. And it sounds like you have some really educated, phenomenal women who have a lot of knowledge to offer, which is so important in its own right, but also having that personal connection. I love, and I will tell you that it was just a couple of years ago, so years after that experience, that I ran into one of those women while visiting a fellow church and had not seen her or been in contact with her for several years. And my gosh, we walked into the room and it was like, oh my gosh, and ran and hugged each other. And, you know, and just, I think what I'm hearing from you guys and what I think I've heard in other circles too, is that is the experience of women who attend these classes, is having that connection, sharing in a short period of time, and yet having just that understanding, like you said, of we might be doing ministry in different ways, but we're both doing ministry and serving God's kingdom, and there's a lot of connection there. So I think it's really wonderful that you're providing that platform for women to experience that, to have that knowledge aspect as well as the connection aspect. So I know that.
If I can throw in here, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, if I can throw in here real quick, sometimes the class part of things keeps people from attending because it seems very educational and very knowledge-based and very like, I have to be whatever. But the gamut of women that attend the classes, that teach the classes, are all over the place. So don't let the word classes like keep you from attending one, just because they're really interactive with other women with some good content. So just want to throw that in there.
No, I'm glad you did. I think that's an important point, and really that an opportunity for all women to participate, no matter what situation they might be at the time. Yeah.
If I could also add the significance of the name, Ignite 3126. Ignite is because we want to get that spark going, kind of a flame in people. But the 3126 comes from Proverbs 31:26, which says, she opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. And that's the kind of spirit that we want these classes to really spark among us.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and a phenomenal, just a phenomenal verse there for that, and a phenomenal thing to talk about, speaking with kindness that comes from God. I love it. Thank you guys so much. So again, that's correct me if I'm wrong, Ignite 3126, right? Yeah, that's the title. We did have a question come in. Someone was wanting to make sure they heard that title right. So Ignite 3126. So in addition to that program, I know there are a couple of others. So if you guys want to share maybe some of the other offerings that you have as well.
Well, more recent, well, go ahead, Nicole, why don't you share about the credentialing and SMM?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we have had just some really neat opportunities and conversations about vetting women for ministry. There isn't currently anything in our fellowship that says this is how we say a woman is vetted for ministry, that she has kind of run through these things, and we can say without a doubt that she is biblically sound. She's, knows how to be relationally engaged, those types of things. So over the past few years, we've developed what's called credentialing. And so women in ministry have the chance to kind of go through this process where there's an application and then there's just some different steps to really be vetted for ministry, to say, hey, I am not only like here and like, hi, I'm here, I'm ready to do ministry, but also like I can say without a doubt that I am called to ministry, that I am prepared for ministry, and that others can validate and say that about me as well. So we kind of have a team that has worked up the application, the interview, and that kind of process. So it's just really exciting to see us move in that direction and have a chance to, vet women for ministry. So that's credentialing. And then SMM, which is now called Sisters Mentoring with a Mission, is a discipleship program I mentioned earlier that is over 100 years old. It's a lot older than me. I'm not 100 years old. But the organization is over 100 years old, and it's a discipleship ministry for girls 1st through 12th grade. And it currently exists in an after-school setting in the Warsaw area. So it originally kind of started in the home of a pastor's wife, and then that became the model where groups met in homes, and then it became a church model where it was a ministry within the church setting. And now we're going outside of the church walls again and meeting girls right where they're at. So it's an after-school program, but it can be, I like to say, community-based program. So it could occur in a church, in a community center, in a park, whatever. And it's really just a place where women connect with girls and have a relationship and talk about Jesus. And so it's really cool because I mentioned earlier that I thought I was going to work with teens, but I now work with girls in 1st through 12th grade, so I work with all of them. And then I work with college women as well, and then older women, and those age groups turn around and work with the younger. And it's just so neat to see how God grows the girls through different phases and how they turn around and, help the next generation grow. And so we do have curriculum that we write and that we use. And then I've created a training program called Building Blocks as well that will help equip women that work with girls and teens, but also anybody that works with children and teens, because that's just something that is cool to be able to offer. But yeah, so Sisters Mentoring with a Mission is discipleship for girls specifically, because we definitely believe that women are called to turn around and mentor the next generation.
Phenomenal. Yeah, that's great. Love seeing that reach for all different age groups and all the way down to young girls who are part of our community and who we want to see raised up with biblical foundation. That's really wonderful. And I think this day and age, I think there's more focus, but can grow of how important it is to raise up strong women, and that means starting with them when they're young, if possible, and mentoring them in that way so that they can become strong women, especially strong women of Christ. So really phenomenal to see that coming forward. So before I move on and ask another question, I just want to make sure, did we miss anything? Are there any other resources?
Oh, there are a few more.
What else can you tell us about?
We also offer a magazine, and it just comes out once a year, but it's a way to encourage writers among our women. And so we try to spend time with women if they want. In fact, we're just kicking off in September a once a month writers forum for women who like to write. So the magazine usually has a theme, and so we invite women in our fellowship to write and kind of cover different aspects of the theme. We also have a blog. We have an e-newsletter, and we ask different women to write. So we feel like one form of leadership is writing, and women who have the ability to write, it gives them a platform so that they can use their writing skills for the Lord and develop them further. And it's been, personally, that's one of my favorite parts of the ministry for some reason. But it's just a blessing.
Yeah, I'd like to jump. Oh,
go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to jump in and say it's a way to develop writers, but it is also just another way that Women of Grace networks women, because it's, as a reader, I don't write for the magazine. As a reader, it's just so encouraging to see what God is doing in the lives of women nationally, globally, on the mission field, right next door. And it's just a neat way to interact with stories that you wouldn't otherwise get to interact with outside of this magazine.
Yeah, we've had a few situations at National Conference where we've been at the display and some woman comes up and we introduce her to somebody else who's standing there, and she says, "Oh, you wrote that article," and next thing you know, they're over in a corner chatting with each other. And there's yes, that networking again is a powerful part of it.
Fantastic.
So we also are responsible for the sessions at the focus retreats. This is just this year, we're starting to do women's sessions at the focus retreats where the pastors and people in ministry go. And also we do women's sessions at national conferences. And one more thing, we are developing a trauma training ministry that is going to be training, like our facilitators are all going to be trained in trauma care, and also individuals who work, anybody in ministry really, will be able to be trained more intensely on trauma care. One of our board members is responsible for that, and she has worked through a lot of different aspects of trauma and is now preparing the materials to do our trainings. As soon as COVID is over, whenever that is.
Well, in fact, you're jumping ahead here, Vicki, and I'm gonna let it roll because you're transitioning beautifully into my next question. So thank you. I did want to just ask, in this current climate where we're dealing with the COVID, how has that impacted your programs? Because of several of the things you've talked about are in-person opportunities, which are wonderful, but I'm going to guess some of that hasn't been able to carry on. So just curious how that's impacted, how you've adjusted, and what you guys have been able to do during this season.
That's been a huge question, because we all agree as a board and with some consultants that we've brought on that the main key to our whole ministry is relationships. We are a very relational ministry, and it's what we can offer that the average women's ministry can't. Like a national women's ministry, they have a lot to offer, but they can't offer the close relationships like we offer within the fellowship for women to get to know each other. So that was quite a shock when we started realizing our Ignite classes. Our goal was to do at least one a month in different places, and we go all over, and all of a sudden we couldn't do any of them. They were all being canceled, and we were just getting new areas opened and new opportunities, and then all that fell through. And that also is probably our main source of income other than donations, is the class. So we've had a lot of questions about what do we do. So what we started doing was just 1 hour Zoom meetings. We just called them online encounters. And what we would do is pick a topic, have about 20 minutes of presentation, and then go into breakout rooms with some questions to discuss together, and then come back together 10 minutes before the end of the hour to just debrief and share what people learned. And it's been really exciting to see some people in the fellowship getting to know each other, especially the breakout rooms, because we have, maybe 4 or 5 women in a room, and they get half an hour to talk. So that's kind of how we've done. Oh, and was I going to mention Thrive, or I didn't mention Thrive.
Oh, yeah.
Bring it on, Thrive. Tell us about
I'm sorry. There were some things that Jen was going to do. So about 2 years ago, Ann Brown from Goshen approached us about her concern for pastors' wives and encouragement that they need. And so we've helped her with her startup of a ministry called Thrive, which is specifically for pastors' wives. And so they were just getting started, and the COVID happened. And so they've been meeting online too. In fact, they met weekly for prayer throughout the most of the quarantine, severe quarantine. And so now they're meeting once a month. In fact, the next meeting is next Tuesday at 2 p.m. But that's been a real blessing too, to see how that's encouraged the pastors' wives to have that chance to talk about different topics. And they also have a newsletter that gets sent out.
Great.
To pastors' wives.
Great. Love it.
Yeah.
So
So
glad.
Zoom has been a real blessing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, talk about just the culture across the US. I think we've all gotten real used to the video calls, probably to a point of wishing we could get off of our video calls. The novelty
Yeah.
maybe worn off a little bit, but I'm so glad that that's been a resource for you all, because I think I'm hearing what you're saying, Vicki, of just that it's the relationships that are really the most important thing. And so even in this season when we can't gather in person, I'm so glad that opportunity has been there, where you can still reach women, you guys can still chat and connect and go through all of that. So I do just want to ask you both, from your personal experiences and your personal standpoints, is what do you see as being the biggest benefit for women who participate in these programs? So maybe we've already answered it, but I do just wanted to ask that of what do you see being the biggest benefit that women walk away from when they're connected to these programs?
Yeah, I think relationships is our kind of our token thing that we have to offer, the networking and relationships that occur through events, through programs, through all of those things. And I think as women in ministry, oftentimes we can feel like I'm over here in no man's land doing whatever I think God has called me to, but I don't necessarily have the same community that my husband has. I don't have a husband, but my husband has, or the youth pastor has, or XYZ. So we can feel kind of truncated and off by ourselves. And so when we gather via Zoom calls or in person in a class or even through writing, there's just a connection, a kindred spirit that happens. I like to say that something different happens when it's just women gathered. Not that God isn't in the midst of mixed gendered groups, but there's walls that fall down and there's barriers that are removed when it's just women in the room. And so that's, I think, the biggest benefit of events, ministries, programs that we have to offer, is just that chance to say, hey, I understand where you're at. I've been there before, or I at least understand where you're coming from. And to just be able to have those conversations with each other, pray for each other, and walk away 10 years later and be able to come back and say, oh, I kind of sort of know your story. Fill me in on what's happened since.
Yeah.
I think for me, one of the most exciting things is just seeing how women blossom. And for example, when we very first started the Ignite classes, there was a young woman who was very shy, timid. Her pastor wanted her to get involved and help with ministries, and she says, I don't think I'm qualified. I don't know. She started taking the classes and she really enjoyed it. And she was just asking, when's the next class? How do I get there? And and we've had women fly across the country to go to a class because it was a class they wanted. So she went through the program, and I ran into her a year or two later after she finished, and she said, I'm leading the prison ministry for my church, leading, we have a huge ministry at a women's prison. And she was telling me all these things that she was doing. And she said, 4 years ago, I would never have dreamed that I could do these things. But she developed confidence and encouragement and support, friends. Yeah. So I love seeing those success stories where women have found both the theological grounding, the biblical grounding, and at the same time the encouragement, the affirmation, others coming alongside and helping her along. So that's probably the kind of thing that we see most often.
Yeah, I would say I've seen similar things in Sisters Mentoring with a Mission. Just as I mentioned earlier that I work with college women who come out just to work with girls. They don't necessarily know what they're signing up to do. But I've walked just kind of this journey with several college women who have now turned around and come back as leads of a site or They're on my cabinet of women who write the curriculum and dream the big dreams for girls ministries. And really what got them involved is they just wanted to show up and serve girls and serve the Lord. And then they slowly got handed pieces of leadership and were able to lead a small group or teach one of the weeks or whatever little piece they got in their leadership tool belt. And now they're just passionate about seeing girls meet Jesus and have other people resourced that way as well. So it's just neat to see, we offer this little snippet, but what God does with that is really cool.
Yeah.
We've even had girls change their majors in school.
Yep, or go on to seminary, and it's really neat.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both. And I just want to follow up by saying, I know that you both are passionate about reaching women and wanting them to be connected. So I do want to just ask if any of our listeners out there are wanting to connect with the organization as a whole or with any particular program, what's their best next steps? How can they do that?
Well, they can always go to the website for starters and explore a little bit and get an idea of what it is they're interested in. But of course, our email is available, phone calls, call the office. We have an 800 number for the office. I guess we should put that in the chat. We can put that in the chat. We are glad to hear from anybody, and really excited. I should mention who our board members are in case somebody knows some of them. Jen Avey is our Director of Leadership Development, and of course, Nicole is our Director of Girls Ministries. We also have Cindy Swain her husband is pastor at Homerville, Ohio. We have Josie Ramirez from California. We have Amy Shirk from Chicago. And I'm missing somebody. Oh, and me. Did I miss somebody?
Did you say
Cindy
Schuler?
Schuler, yeah. Cindy Schuler as our Director of Operations. So we're kind of scattered around the country, and we really love getting together. Even our board meetings have been kind of a slumber party type of thing where we all stay in one house and spend 3 days together. And I feel that is really a key. It kind of has given us a pattern for how women need to commune with each other, and just that like-mindedness, how healthy it is when ministry women can get together and share.
Absolutely. That's great. Well,
I will mention,
No.
I was just going to mention that SMM is a part of Women of Grace, but we also have our own Facebook page, Instagram, website, and email. So that's smmnational.org, and then the email is smm@wgsa.org. They're connected, but two separate ways to find us.
Wonderful. And I know for those who are joining us on Zoom, we're putting some of these up into the chat box. For those of you who are joining us on Facebook or who come in and watch the recording later, we can go ahead and put some of these contact information pieces in the comments on the Facebook page when we post the video so that others can have those resources as well. And I do think we have a slide here for the Women of Grace website that we can put up so that our viewers can see that and know what that is and access that so that they can, in addition to what you've shared today, they can go on at their leisure and take a look through. I know you've got web pages up there for the various programs as well as your board list and things of that nature so that folks can see all of these things that are available to them and the many ways that they can connect and the resources that are available to them. So for both of you, I just want to thank you so much for spending the time here with me today and sharing this information with our viewers, as well as just the passion that you put into this ministry. It's clear that you both care very deeply about this organization. I am certain that that is true of all of your board members. And I think it's wonderful that we have this piece of our fellowship here dedicated specifically to offering those relationships and those growth opportunities to the women who are in our fellowship. So thank you for your service in that.